Things are really, really not looking good for Concord, and I wish I could say that it was going another way, but the reality is what it is. Concord's critical reception among myriad reviews from 33 critic reviews has been mixed to average, and user scores just don't seem particularly enthusiastic about the game. But then you look at the Steam concurrent player numbers, and that's where things get extremely bleak. The fact that the game's launch only saw a maximum of 697 players playing at the same time, and the fact that since then that's been its all-time peak concurrent player numbers already spells death for this game. But looking at recent stats and seeing the numbers already pretty paltry somehow trend further downwards suggests that this is a game that simply cannot survive. This is a live service. Its lifeblood is players returning and a decent enough player base continuing to engage with the game. At these numbers, we're looking at a situation where eventually it will become difficult for players to find others to be able to matchmake with and play the game with. Now, this is just Steam numbers. From what I understand, PlayStation 5 numbers are a little better, but not by much, not to the degree where it can be expected that this game will become a thriving live service, making a major comeback. That is just such an impossible prospect. In fact, as I was recording this video, this report from IGN came out estimating what sales look like for Concord, and it's utterly abysmal. This is a financial disaster for Sony. Scrolling down, you'll find exact stats. Concord is estimated to have sold around 10,000 units on Steam and around 15,000 units on PlayStation. This is as worst case scenario as a AAA live service launch can get. As for what analysts say about why the game didn't sell, well, there is the fact that they utterly and completely botched the marketing. Its quality, while okay, just doesn't necessarily make people want to switch from existing hero shooters that have already saturated the market. And as I've discussed before, this game is just too kind of okay at everything. It's not bad at any one particular thing, but it's just not awesome at any one particular thing either. And in terms of its identity and its gameplay approach, none of it stands out in a way that makes it competitive, especially given other games of the genre that just does what Concord does, but better and more feature complete. This is the definition of a game that chased a trend too hard to the point where it just kind of blended in, and people just couldn't bother to engage with a game that has a base price of $40 and that ultimately just doesn't justify that price point because it's meager in its content and features offering and doesn't do anything unique enough for it to be something worth sticking with or something worth spending time on. And even on Steam, we've seen the review score dip over time. The fact that there's only 477 reviews total already highlights how few are participating in this game, but this mixed score just doesn't help optics either. This is about where the score is sitting across the board, critics and players alike. And usually things like how much engagement there is surrounding this game on social media tends to be a good indicator for how strong the community surrounding a game is. And looking at the Concord official Reddit page, you can see that there's only 4.1 thousand members who have subscribed to this and are keeping up to date about this forum and the Concord dedicated part of the page. And among those 4.1 thousand members, the vast majority of people who are engaging with the subreddit, they're not expressing a whole lot of enthusiasm surrounding the game's future. And even if they like aspects of the game, a lot of them do admit that there are some issues with this game in the way that while its core gameplay, its fundamental gameplay is fun, the content surrounding that gameplay, the modes, and its approach to progression, and just the general playability of this game doesn't stand out and isn't something that players would choose over other games that basically are this, but again, better. But what's really going to kill this game in this early juncture and make this a product not worth purchasing, not worth spending $40 on, and not risking money for is the fact that players are already having trouble matchmaking, finding other players to play with, and it's been like a week since the game launched. So right here we have a Reddit post from 5 days ago that reads, "So I just waited 8 minutes for matchmaking and then it timed out. I love the game and I want to play it. Unfortunately, I can't wait 8+ minutes between games. Decided to play something else and come back on peak hours. This really doesn't look promising at all." Keep in mind that currently, if you go to Steam and look at the trend, concurrent player numbers are starting to delve into the mid double digits. And 5 days ago, which is the day in which that Reddit post was published, the lowest numbers we would see for concurrent players was 138. That's still paltry, but it's now worse than ever. Yeah, I imagine matchmaking, especially on PC, will be something that will test players' patience. Now this particular player is located in Belgium, and it was around 11 a.m. their time, so that might have impacted things, but it doesn't matter. This game is being sold worldwide, and it is expected to function a certain way no matter where you buy it. And right now, it's just getting to a point where, as a live service with almost no players, especially the PC version, it's becoming a product that is, kind of barely functional. And then for certain game modes like Rivalry, some people are saying straight up it's impossible to matchmake no matter how long they wait. I've queued many times today for Rivalry as it is my preferred format, but each time it's taken over 10 minutes without any match. I cancel and requeue and I get another 10+ minutes without finding a match. That's just a game that is straight up not functional for certain folks and for specific modes. Now, there are accounts of people who are not having that much trouble finding players through matchmaking, especially on PlayStation 5. You can see that PlayStation 5 players are averaging roughly 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds to find a match. And there's some PC players who seem to be having better luck. And I imagine that they're playing maybe during hours where there are more players. So during these peak hours right here. But even those peak hours were starting to delve into like triple digits, like low triple digits on PC. So I don't imagine that this will be something that will be sustained for long. I imagine that over time, even those players who are maybe not having as much of a hard time finding other players to play with will start experiencing issues with matchmaking. This seems to be where the game is trending. Even games journalists are speaking out about their own experiences. So here's PC Gamer saying, "I've also had some pretty long wait times on Concord over the last weekend. I got to about 7 minutes before I found a game. This game is failing to capture players who were kind of iffy about engaging with Concord. But even for players who actually want to play the game, it's giving them less reasons to engage with the title. It's testing their patience, and so they're going to lose even the crowd that the few who remain who are deciding to give this game a chance. And this is kind of the spiral that a dying live service goes through. It just gets to a point where unless there's some kind of infusion of players, it's just not a functional product anymore, which is why some people are asking if it's morally questionable for Sony to keep selling this game, if it's morally questionable for them to charge money for this game. On Reddit, you also find plenty of folks who have played the game and gave it a chance, being constructive and kind of expressing their thoughts on why this game just isn't working despite some fun aspects. Like this particular Reddit user, I think, has a really apt description of what a lot of folks are saying. This game is fun, but lowering it to $20 even doesn't justify how bare bones this game is. Advertising how I buy and own everything day one means nothing when there isn't content to begin with. It's just not feature complete enough. Content is just too bare bones, and it's just something that's less acceptable in a landscape that is so oversaturated now when it comes to those live service hero shooters. All but one skin for each character is just recolored skin, so even the cosmetic aspect of the game, which is its main source of monetization, just doesn't do a good enough job to compel people to buy those cosmetic elements because their design is just really boring. Recolors is not something that people want to spend money on. They want those unique costumes and designs. Like, they will spend money on some color changes and whatnot, but generally the base costume itself the skin itself has to look cool before they decide it's worth investing money and customizing them further with, color changes. How boring the characters are is also something that's been heavily criticized. The lack of identity or of a strong identity. Unique skins would have been a means to make them more appealing, but the lack of compelling skins means that the characters all kind of come off as a bit generic. There's discussions here of how it feels like the cinematics are a bit of waste of money because they could have done a better job of engaging players into this world and the characters through in-game banter that you see a lot in, say, Overwatch, that is strangely omitted in this game. And then when it comes to gameplay, just the lack of innovation on modes, the fact that it's just your usual fare, but done not quite as good as the masters who have done those modes better. Those are aspects that are brought up and that plenty of people have been agreeing with. And then there's the character design discussion and how important that is, especially to a hero shooter where each character has to have a really standout silhouette, and you have to be able to look at them and they immediately have to kind of draw you in, and their design immediately has to be something that kind of sticks in your head. And even from a gameplay perspective, character design matters in a hero shooter, and this thread I think highlights stuff that I really, really agree with. For example, they talk about how when you look at characters in Concord, it's actually hard to tell what their role, like the design language of these characters doesn't speak to the kind of role that they would play in game. So a tank just doesn't look like a tank sometimes in this game, or a flanker doesn't necessarily look like a flanker sometimes in this game. One example that's highlighted here is Roka, super annoying, long-range harasser. Why is this character's hitbox so tiny? And when you compare that to a flanker like ITZ, who's supposed to speed tank to get in your face to do damage, why does a backline harasser like Roka have a smaller hitbox than ITZ? Even from a gameplay perspective, there are balancing aspects to the size of characters' features and how big their hitboxes are that make them more viable to shoot because of the kind of role that they play. So, for example, Pharah in Overwatch, who has those massive shoulder pads jutting out, that isn't just there because of, the cosmetic and aesthetic aspects of the character, but also because this character's long-range harasser with air mobility, and so that makes the hitbox bigger. That inverted triangle shape makes it easier for players to see and target Pharah, to balance out the fact that she is this kind of long-range air mobility harasser. Stuff like that needs to be a major consideration for games like these, and that's one area where Concord kind of falls short on. This user asks, if you looked at just the character design of Lark, Hamar, and Duchess, can you tell me from a design language perspective what their role is and how they play? This individual gambles and bets that you probably couldn't. Whereas in Overwatch, when you look at Mercy, you can tell that Mercy is a healer. When you look at Widowmaker, you can tell that Widowmaker is the sniper. When you look at Reinhardt, you can tell that Reinhardt is the tank. When you look at Genji, you can tell that Genji is a flanker, so on and so forth. The design language of the characters in Overwatch, that's one area where they absolutely nailed it. And that just doesn't come across at all in Concord. And that's something that I didn't even think about, but now that people have pointed it out, I think it's absolutely true. Others are highlighting that just even considering the cosmetic aspect of character designs, something got lost along the way between concept art and the final product. So right here, somebody highlights how this concept art looks way more interesting than the final results. Certain design elements were changed and just kind of ended up making them look more generic. Like, look at this thing right here that looks like intestines almost, and that kind of got covered up. And yeah, there's something about this that just with small little details, it makes it look more compelling. But I also think that it has a lot to do with the art style that Concord went for. I think this game would have been much better suited with something more stylized, whether it's cel-shaded or, I don't know, just something a little more quote-unquote animated or cartoony looking. But they went for a photorealistic look that I think took the character designs that could have been compelling in another style and kind of made them kind of look really bland and flat. I think taking the photorealistic approach with this one was a mistake, and it diluted the elements of the character designs that they came up with that could potentially be interesting and that could pop out. But yeah, that's kind of generally where we're at. These are kind of the discussions that are going on, and the player numbers, ladies and gentlemen, it is as clear an indication that a live service is dead as you can get. I really don't think there's any sort of miracle even that can save Concord at this stage. This is literally potentially the worst performance I've ever seen for a AAA live service in all my time covering video games, one that is of this scale and coming from such a major publisher like Sony and PlayStation, this is literally the worst results I've ever seen for a live service launch. If the other ones that perform better couldn't somehow make a comeback, there's no way in hell this one can. And it pains me to say that, but that's just the reality of how this stuff tends to trend when the results are like these. And so that's just kind of the realistic outlook on how things are looking like for Concord. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know about the state of Concord. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the game. And if you've played, whether you've been having a good experience with it or whether you agree with a lot of the criticisms and what you think about just everything that people are saying right now about the title, share your thoughts in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.